Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining. We are so excited to have you for the discussion here in the panel on veteran support initiatives. Now, before we officially kick off, a few housekeeping items. We'll be opening for a Q&A at the end of this discussion, so please make sure that you submit your questions throughout the discussion at any time using the Q&A engagement tool that's on your page. And we're going to try to answer these all during the session. If a more fulsome answer is needed, or if we just run out of time, we'll do our best to address the questions by email and following the event. And lastly, for the best viewing experience, what we recommend is closing any programs or browser sessions that you might have running in the background that would cause issues. Webinars, as you know, are bandwidth intensive, so closing any unnecessary browser tabs will help conserve that bandwidth. And before we begin our discussion panel today, I'd like to highlight the outstanding work that's done by our partners, Thayer Leadership and Chief Executive Group, to raise awareness of best practices among America's corporate leaders when it comes to helping military veterans and their families. So they created the Patriots in Business Award to recognize the innovative and dedicated initiatives of companies, big and small, to support America's veteran and military families in meaningful ways. So in doing so, they hope to inspire more organizations to improve or begin supporting their efforts. So the Patriots in Business Award is presented annually in the categories of large enterprise, medium-sized business, and small businesses. So the third annual Patriots in Business Award was presented in September to Comcast NBC Universal, Drexel Hamilton, and HumeCap. So congratulations to these three companies for your outstanding contributions to helping America's veterans, active duty, military, as well as military spouses. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is introduce our individual panelists. So what we're going to do is just start with a quick introduction about yourself, military experience, the current corporate initiatives, and then you can also please tell us about your companies as well as the veteran focus. So what I thought I'd start with General Linda Singh. Thank you for joining us.
Everyone. Thank you. And happy Veterans Day to everyone. And I want to thank NASDAQ and Rob and the team for allowing us to really be here and participate in this today. My background, I served as the Adjutant General in the state of Maryland, the great state of Maryland, and retired last year after 38 years of service. And, the thing that I think about most in terms of my overall military career is having been able to work with so many amazing men and women just across all of the services. And even though I was Army, I got a chance to work with and work for, Marines and Navy. And when I just think about the camaraderie and the teamwork, it really, truly is amazing. And, my background, I was a logistician, ordnance officer. And, when I think of just how many times I've been able to use that, not just on the military side, but on the civilian side, it allowed me to really have an amazing career that I just still now, I'm kind of propelled and continuing to grow that career, even though I've retired. Currently, I am the CEO of Kaleidoscope Effects. I'm the CEO and founder of Kaleidoscope Effect, and we focus in on leadership consulting, management consulting. If you are looking for a team to work with you on strategy, project management, IT service support, and really getting it to the heart of where technology, innovation, people all come together, we're the organization for you. So I look forward to participating on the panel today. Thank you.
Thank you, General. And we discussed before, we're going to do this in rank order, top to bottom. So Dan.
That's right. So I departed the military as a major. So, I will absolutely salute General Dr. Singh. But again, thank everyone, wish everyone a happy Veterans Day. I want to thank all the women and men who are watching today who have served or who support those who serve, as well as extend that to all those who serve and protect our rights around the world. I want to thank NASDAQ. Thank you very much, Rob. Appreciate this, and the Thayer Leadership Group for putting this together. I think it's a really powerful discussion, and I'm honored to participate again this year. So I am the CEO of TIBCO Software. And at TIBCO Software, we focus on essentially helping you make smarter, faster decisions with real-time data. And what I love that about, right, my military background is it's all about gathering context. It's about working as a team and having a shared consciousness, kind of to quote General McChrystal, who I had a chance to work with. My military background and my affinity to this, I spent 8 years on active duty as a paratrooper, first based as an infantry officer paratrooper based in Europe, and then as a company commander based in the United States. I went to business school after my military service and have been in software ever since. Really focused on embracing that intersection between strategy and data, and how more information helps us make better decisions, which really comes back to what we're here doing, right? What we have all learned, right, about service and about gathering the data is that honoring veterans and giving veterans a chance to transition into civilian life is critically important. I'm here as part of my membership on Vets and Tech as an advisory board member, and I'm really looking forward to sharing more about what we've learned about helping veterans transition, become very effective members of their communities, and more importantly, to benefit and help our companies as we continue to really lead the world in innovation and transformation. So thanks a lot, Rob. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate it. Look forward to getting to those topics too. And then Ken, as a former E4, myself, Captain, please take it away.
Thanks so much, Rob. And again, it's an honor to be here, and happy Veterans Day to all. And I appreciate everybody who has served, certainly. So it's an honor to be here with Linda and as Dan as well. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. I started my career going to the military academy, and then went off to Air Defense Artillery and spent my first 3 years in Germany as a Air Defense Artillery officer. And I was sort of geared towards the technology side, which is why I chose the Air Defense Artillery as the branch that I selected, and then moved on into supporting sort of the research and development side of the Air Defense Artillery, working on the Patriot missile system requirements at the time. And then determined that I wanted to move into the private sector, so actually landed a position with IBM, again, very geared towards the technology arena. So that served me very well, and then moved around to a few different companies out in the Silicon Valley and so forth, and spent quite a few years there, and have been in the technology industry my whole career. And today I've been the CEO, president of Insight Enterprises for the past 11 years. And we're a technology solution provider, really providing technology support, services, solutions around software development, networks, data centers, public cloud, all initiatives globally at all size companies, public sector clients, as well as large enterprise and commercial clients as well. So really pleased to be here. And of course, veterans play a big part of our business, as we have a lot of focus on hiring veterans. We really like the skill sets that veterans provide to our business. So looking forward to the contributions I can make today.
Well, thank you, Ken. So appreciate it. And with that, we can jump right there. And just to set up sort of the next question, a couple of my own experiences, is just about the numbers, or what I call, frankly, that cultural divide. So what I find is working for NASDAQ has terrific support for veterans and a great network of those of us who've served, but the reality is there's not a lot of us, right, overall in the population or on the team. So with that in mind, we had talked about in our conversations prior, if you could tell us what your transition was like, or any personal experiences that then have informed the programs that you've put in place in corporate. So Ken, I thought we could start with you, because you had talked about the tech as well, and how that informed what you've done.
It's a very easy transition for me, because I had such a technology focus, and it made very logical for me to do that. So the military provided a great framework, lots of training, and there's so many functions in the military where there's great technical skills. And I don't think a lot of the people really appreciate just how technically competent and capable they are, and how extendable that is to the private sector. So that's the first point I would make, is that there's tremendous skill sets that are there that are very, very appropriate in the private sector. So for me, the transition was very, very smooth, actually, in making that. So we as a company, of course, are really trying to embrace that and take advantage of that. And then very much really focused on, for us, what's so key that the military provides is all the leadership training. We see that as being so relevant to what we do. And we're a big customer of the Thayer Leadership Group. We send all of our leaders through their training globally. We send all of our leaders, bring them here to West Point and train them every single year. So it's really been a great program for us. It really provided a foundation because we believe in business, just like in the military, that leadership really is what makes the difference. It's what differentiates companies continually. So we've got a big commitment towards building future leaders in the company and use the framework that the military has provided, which was very interesting because initially I was concerned that our leaders in APAC and our leaders in EMEA who aren't as experienced with the military surroundings as we are in the US, how relevant would that be? And then once we brought them over, comments were best training, most unbelievable training they've ever had in their lives. So again, very relevant. It's embedded into what we do every day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So, mine similar was a relatively easy transition, Rob. I was actually selected to go teach economics back at West Point. And this was 1998. And the Army was essentially enjoying the peace dividend, right, at the time, and when drawing down and less active. And in 1998, as we can all recall, this was the days of Webvan and PetSmart, right? Whoever thought they'd have their groceries delivered, online. So, I was visiting business schools on my way to go be qualified to teach economics, and that got me very excited, like around technology, an intersection of data and strategy. So I went on to business school at Harvard and then have been in technology ever since. The one thing that was interesting for me is I stayed in the individual ready reserves. So I never resigned my commission and wanted to be, essentially able to be called upon if needed. And sure enough, in 2008, I was called upon. And so I spent 2009 deployed, and that was actually a much harder transition to go back and serve in harm's way along with, my fellow women and men who were serving, and then to make that transition back was a challenging piece. And what really was interesting to me is the young, E4s, which you can relate to, as well as the young O4s, who spent, from 01 to 08 in a constant state of deployment. And not all of them can continue to do that. Yeah. So I feel we owe them a great debt. So I love this aspect of all the things Ken said: leadership inclination, technical training, understanding teamwork are all valuable traits, but we also owe a debt of service to them that served. And so building programs like Vets in Tech, which is also supporting this, helping give young women and men the skills that they need to make that transition is critically important. And oftentimes, particularly at Vets in Tech, we focus a lot on, enlisted ranks, and 63% of them are represented or report as minorities. So it's also a great chance to bring diversity into your teams that you wouldn't have otherwise and leverage those skills they built while they were in the military. So I think all the programs we do around supporting vets are total win-wins. My transition was very, very easy before. It was harder the second time around. And so I think we really need to lean in to continue to support those who are making that transition now.
Yeah, and mine was.
I think you supported a few times, right?
I'm sorry. Yes, and mine was slightly different because I ran a dual career. Having been in the National Guard and Reserves, I was always, working simultaneously as I was serving. But when I think of just the overall transition, so going on 2 deployments, my first deployment, I was gone from my employer, my civilian employer at the time, Accenture, for 18 months. And that's a long time to be going out of pocket. And you really have to think about, all the things that happens in terms of, the career transition and, how is it going to impact, your career? How does it impact your ability to swing back into work? I actually rolled back into back into the group that I had left. So I rolled back into the defense group, and I went from, being the assistant of the Army account lead to being the Army account lead. And so that one was an easier transition. I rolled back into the mode of, business development and serving our clients. The second deployment was a lot tougher for many reasons. I was a lot more senior. It was in Afghanistan. I ended up having to come home on a medical. So there were so many, different variations that went on in that whole year that, when I came back to work, I was actually going through the process of becoming a general officer. So therefore, I couldn't go back into the defense group, which is where I really had spent a good portion of my time. And so we had to figure out, how was I going to roll back into that particular organization? And we were able to figure it out. I became, more operationally focused and working with our client teams. And then, now when I think about, just my organization and how we're focusing in on things, and really, some of the things that I do in terms of providing service, veterans and taking care of veterans is extremely important to me, which is why I continue to stay engaged with, nonprofits and, some of the nonprofits that, I work with, which is the Easter Seals here in the Maryland, DC, Virginia area, as well as Headstrong. And why I continue to push that focus is to ensure that we are not just educating folks on what, the needs are for our veterans, but then how do we value what they do? And, if you're a veteran out there and you're wondering how you continue to serve, actually serving for a nonprofit is a great way to continue to serve.
Yeah.
I think, we had touched on that too, and thank you all for those perspectives too. And as we bridge that, as I still call a cultural divide, we touched on international as well as business, and we all get more transnational. What can bridging that gap do? What can military members across different nations do to have a connected culture, if you will? Yeah. And what's your experience with that?
So I think November 11th is a great day to discuss that, right? Because this is a day where we're acknowledging, in many countries around the world, service and sacrifice. So it's not just Veterans Day here, but it's a day where many countries recognize. But I do think the two things that are interesting for companies that veterans do provide is we're operating in a multinational world in all aspects. Right. When I was in Baghdad, right, there were 100 countries essentially represented there doing various things, including Tonga, right? So there are aspects of bridging that perspective, I think, is valuable in all areas that serve. So as a company, in a multinational company, I absolutely also continue to extend opportunities to bring veterans in from other backgrounds in other countries. So I think that veterans bring this unique aspect of understanding operating multilaterally and operating in different cultural context. And in the end, if we're going to continue to get better as an organization, as a company, or as a country, we have to be cognizant of all of those backgrounds and bring all of those different capabilities to bear.
Yeah, and I would agree with that because, having worked across a number of countries, when I was in Afghanistan, we had, 60 different countries represented, and looking at how we engaged and interacted. And what was really interesting about that is I ran into individuals from other countries that actually worked for the same employer, which was pretty neat. We kind of knew each other, but we didn't really know each other. So that was a great, connection. But when I also think about the partnership that I recently finished up with Bosnia-Herzegovina and Estonia and looking at their forces, I think what we have to realize is that, there's tons of countries out there that all have a different level of armed forces that, they support their forces and they support them at varying levels. But, you need to get familiar with like Armed Forces Day and, when are they celebrating their Veterans Days? And sometimes even looking at those ceremonies, because I think what you would realize is that, if you wear the uniform, you have a personal connection to another military member. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter where you are. You somehow come together and form a connection and form a relationship. And I still stay in touch with a lot of folks that I have dealt with. And I would have to say that, countries that just have stolen my heart. And that's some of the countries in the Balkans and the Baltics that just really has stolen my heart that I try to stay very connected to.
Yeah, and I would add, Rob, similar is that, and I was stationed in Germany. My last year, I was part of a NATO TAC evaluation team. So, of course, that was very multinational. And I think, as Linda said, the bond that you form, independent of languages, is just there. So those connections are lifelong connections. And I think anytime you can reach out to that, there's an immediate connections. We try to do that again through our, offices throughout Europe as well, to try to make sure they understand that that connection, that it does exist, and how much we appreciate and respect what military people across the globe do, certainly sets us apart. It's a differentiator.
Agreed. Thank you. You know, before we move on, just to wrap up this this idea about that cultural divide too, anything that from your leadership standpoint that you have implemented or would like to emulate to help, or that does help with veterans as they transition from military to civilian?
Well, so one of the things that I did in really working with the veterans team at Accenture, and I have to go back to that because right now, you know, I'm a small business and I don't have a large team. But, you know, when I think about just respecting and really understanding how we have a good network for our veterans, and, you know, they get to opt in. So it's not like you can make them be a part and they have to self-identify. And I think we have to respect that. You have to respect the level of privacy that they may want to have because they may not want to be highlighted and brought out. But I will tell you that, you know, veterans are, they make a significant contributions to our corporate environment. And when I think about how I want my organization to be 10 years from now, I want it to be built on the strength of having, you know, veteran employees that are working not just in my company, but I'm looking at other companies that I partner with. Veteran owned is one of the top ones that I'm looking at because I just want to make sure that we're continuing to support that strength and to know that, you know, we bring a capability that sometimes is even deeper than what most people think about.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to the coin, exactly as Linda said. So this first is, how do we make sure we're recruiting and making the most of that? So right at TIBCO, we work with organizations like Breakline, which is, you know, outreach and is essentially a mini technology MBA for the technology side of it. Vets and Tech, as I mentioned, who focus on the 3 E's: education, employment, and entrepreneurship for veterans. So first is helping work with organizations that are really skilled at bridging that cultural gap and giving veterans who are looking for technology careers the right language and the right background. And then, like Linda said, it's critically important to also include veterans in your diversity and inclusion plans. How do I make sure they're engaged? How do we provide them the right employee resources? Because they bring a unique perspective as well, just like every other background. And so thinking in terms of that as the whole part of the puzzle is what we do at TIBCO and what I've done in past organizations. And partnering with organizations, like I said, like Vets and Tech, is a great way to get a great pipeline. And then you have to, as a leader, take ownership of creating the structure for all of your different voices in your company, including veterans, that really to bring your best to bear.
Yeah, Rob, some of the things that we've done that have worked really well for us is we've been big advocates of diversity and inclusion for quite a few years. Of course, it's become very much a vogue right now, but we've been very committed to that. And we include our veterans in that community as far as what we classify as diversity and inclusion. And so we have affinity groups. We've got 5 different affinity groups across our whole population, and veterans are one of those affinity groups, and that really helps them feel, I think, as Linda said, they can opt in, right, and be part of that and find the support they need, just like we do for the LGBT communities, just like we do for Afro allies, the Hispanic communities. There are all these affinity groups that are run by our teammates and so forth. So that provides a sense of belonging, but we also do reach out because we have to do more in this area. So you know, referrals are such a big part of how we find the right teammates going forward. And so we do provide actually extra incentives if you refer a diverse candidate, of which we include, again, military backgrounds as part of that. There's extra actually incentives for those kind of individuals in. We do the same thing in areas. We have a 501(c) charity group that we formed internally as a company, and we help diverse individuals with education. And pay actually extra tuition for those people that are in those affinity groups. So trying to do things all along those lines to really provide that encouragement and to give, you know, to give more focus to those groups. Because again, as we all know, diversity and inclusion is so critical. It makes us better companies. And as we say, it's just the right thing to do. So having very tangential programs that really assist and drive that, it's become pretty much a big part of our culture now.
Yeah, it looks like Rob is refreshing his screen because he was frozen there for a little bit. But I wanted to ask you, Ken, in that aspect of it, right, as you think about your affiliation groups and people self-select, right, what framework do you then create, right, so that, you are equally addressing, representing, and gathering the feedback from those groups, right, and veterans included. But as you think about, right, this is one step in your diversity inclusion strategy.
Yeah, and it's the right point, because it's metrics are everything. So we actually do put a lot of metrics behind it to make sure that we can measure it and see what the progress that we're actually making. And in the veterans specifically, I certainly have a personal affinity towards that. So I certainly am engaged within those individuals and actually do mentor quite a few of those individuals as they're coming through insights, so they can feel that connection and understanding of what's possible, just to sort of bridge that gap a bit. So I do spend and pivot a little bit of time there, since I have a background that they can assimilate with. And there's so many high potential people. That's what I always say. There's just incredible high potential, well-educated people coming from the military that just makes so much sense. They're so prepared for the private sector in my mind.
Yeah, and some of the things that you want to think about in terms of measuring is ensuring, as you're looking at promotions and you're looking at pay and you're looking at, all of those other categories, that, across all of your affinity groups, if you have leadership that's working those groups, they should be able to look and ensure that you're getting, I hate to say equality across those groups, but you're not seeing any kind of trends that would make you say, okay, are we having a problem with a particular group within our overall employee population? That's where it becomes tangible. And when you start seeing trends that is kind of coupled with maybe your 360 feedback, if you're using 360s, within the organization for the organization, not necessarily just for the individuals, that allows you to be able to take that and say, now, how do we put action plans in place to be able to kind of solve for some of the challenges that our employees may be bringing up? So there are some best practices out there. And, one of the things I forgot about through all of this, and it just hit me as I was listening to Ken talk, is that, my Ph.D. study was actually on the transition of, veterans back into the workplace. And the one thing that I was able to really prove out in that is that the support groups are extremely important, because it made them feel like it was part of a network, since they came from a network, a big family, which is the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, or the Navy. It made them feel like they were part of a network. And so that's important. And those affinity groups or employer support groups are extremely important.
Yeah, I love that. Like, we call them employee resource groups, right? And we have, similarly, a great one for the Pride team, and, a tremendous one for those of Black, African American, and Latino descent. And what that is really powerful as a structure, and then I love what each of you said, because at TIBCO, right, we're all about the power of real-time data, right? You're using data, and it's not just your stats that point towards equality. It's stats that point towards inclusion and engagement and those aspects of it. So this combination of having the groups, and when then we're not done, right, we move on and analyze and do that. And I think that applies to all groups, and particularly to our veterans who, right, have unique transition challenges, but they also bring unique opportunities if we do this right. Good. Rob,
and
you're
Tim,
back.
sorry
Good
to
to
drop
see you.
here for a second. I am back, right? So part of it is flexibility. What do you do if you have a hiccup in the technology?
In a VUCA environment, right? It was uncertain that you would be back or not, so we were ready.
Well, and thanks, Dan. You're actually leading to the next topic. So obviously today's topic is leadership and diversity in times of uncertainty, and the current times may just qualify as uncertain. I know we talked about this prior to, but all of the conversation that we've had, and thank you all for it, by the way, just leading up to this. So how does the military background help companies with dealing with uncertainty in uncertain times? So General Singh, I thought we'd start with you. I think you had called this just VUCA on steroids. Was it a VUCA overload that we're getting right now? About how
we might want to define VUCA. I realized I jumped right in. That
is true. So, when I think about just your military leadership in the background, the one thing that always strikes me is when you're in these environments where there's a lot of volatility, there's uncertainty, which is, as we call it, VUCA, and just looking at the overall environment, sometimes that steadfast leadership, the leadership skills that a lot of military folks bring is really what I would call steadfast, right? They know how to take a plan and start working to execution. And if I just think back to, what has happened, this year as I went in and helped, team TIBCO, a technology organization here in the state of Maryland. It's a quasi-government organization. And just in helping that team, and as I'm starting to help them get prepared for their transition to a new CEO, we have the pandemic that hits. And so the first thing I did was to say, what is our contingency plan as a result of this? What if we have to shut down the office? And so this was all, kind of leading up to this. And it was prior to me, really being, requested to be part of the governor's team here. And so when I think about that aspect of it, I'm part of the governor's advisory team here in the state of Maryland on COVID. And it wasn't because, he just wants to have, the military person there. I think part of it was for him to have these different perspectives. And, he realizes that while he'll have all the doctors and all of the clinicians there that are really, talking about the hardcore things, I'm going to be the first one that's talking about, okay, that's great, but how are we going to support the plan? How is all of that going to play out? And he knows that, my background and perspective would be very thoughtful and very steadfast for the overall group. And so I would have to say, our leadership skills are absolutely critical to be leveraged during times of crisis.
Yeah.
Thank you, General.
Yeah, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? Like absolutely defines what March felt like for many of us. And it comes back to Linda's thing, which is, yes, military service, and I want to be careful. Every type of service, anytime you put yourself on the line in a pressure situation, you learn to think critically about situations, and you bring all of that perspective together. But it helped us prioritize. Earlier today, General Williams in the program talked about, right, the Army's new motto, which is people first and winning matters, right? So we brought that kind of an ethos to what we did at TIBCO. So the first thing we did is put all the things in place to protect the health and welfare of our team members and their families. The second priority immediately alongside that was taking care of our customers. And so that enabled us to really think about what we did from a team perspective, how we got focused, and then we wrote from there. As a result, we did things like we launched an application called Gather Smart, which is helping universities like Dartmouth bring their students back on campus safely. Any organization can use essentially a handheld application and a web dashboard to control their employees and monitor their welfare. We did that very quickly because we saw that was a key need. We launched a COVID-19 dashboard, which was available for everybody. So all of our customers, including a lot of pharmaceuticals, could go see that. So to Linda's point, military background gets you break down what's most important, stay focused on that mission, and then drive those solutions really quickly, and then act on that, right? The classic General Eisenhower, whenever faced with a large intractable problem, right, I figure out what the first step is, and I take that. And so that really helped us, I think, in this first early days do that and set us and our customers up for success. And I do not want to diminish. COVID is still a big challenge for organizations and people and communities. And I want to be very empathetic to that. And we worked hard with organizations like City Harvest in London to help them double their support of food insecurity in London using TIBCO software. So this, in many ways, is a very challenging time, but it's also out the best in lots of our organizations and our companies. And I'm heartened by that and optimistic we get through this.
Thanks, Dan. And Ken, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, certainly. I completely agree with Linda, and Dan covered as well. And maybe just a little different point of view would be, it's really all about servant leadership, right? We're steeped in that in the military, and it's so relevant to what we do. And so we've really adopted that. I view certainly one of the most key jobs I have today basically is building leaders. And that's the biggest thing I'm going to leave for the company is have I really built a system around that. So we've really adopted, again, the leadership principles that are so relevant in the military, and they've been so well adopted by our teammates. So things like leader's intent, which the military calls commander intent, That's part of our rigor. Every single day, our teams are doing leaders' intent. Every one of our leaders has a leadership philosophy that's written down, that's shared with their teams, right? We focus on that. Every meeting we do an AAR, right, after action review. We do confirmation briefs. We do back briefs. So all these sort of concepts that the military is so steeped in are so relevant to the private sector. Right. And our team has really just completely accepted them. And I was a little concerned at first that, geez, I'm coming from the military, where they view I'm trying to bring the military into it. And it's none of that. They've just completely adopted these principles because it's all about how do you empower people, right? How do you engage teammates? So you give them the what and the why, and you let them do the how, right? You don't micromanage them. So all those concepts that the military just breathes every single day are so relevant to what we do. So I think that helps us in these type of crisis situations, where first thing we did was what's our leaders' intent around the COVID crisis, right? We cascaded that through the organization. So again, very, very, very similar. And I think we can all benefit from it.
Thanks, Ken. Totally agree. With that in mind, too, really to build then to what this panel is about, which is those veteran support initiatives. So much gained by the contributions on our team, so those with military background. I think there's an acknowledgement out there, which is frankly different than my experience 25 years ago, is there's an understanding of what those military perspectives, or through Thayer Leadership Group, military perspective is so much to offer as well, right? So support, acknowledgement there. Now for veteran support initiatives, what that means from your standpoint. So what are you doing? What can companies do more of to identify and support veterans in the ranks, if you will? So Ken, I thought we'd start with you because you talked about the Thayer principles that you apply throughout the organization. What are you doing? Yeah. What can we all do to support those initiatives?
Yeah, I think it's just the recognition so much, first off, that the skill sets that the military has. The other part that we touched on is, one of the things I learned early on was the fact that if you want the most diverse organization that we'll all ever experience, it's the military, right? I mean, it is the most diverse organization around. Just how it performs. You don't even talk about diverse, at least when I was in it. It wasn't diverse. It was so inclusive and diverse. And those kind of concepts that the rest of the private sector is struggling with now. There's so much to learn from what the military has done in regards to making it such a, transparent, diverse and inclusive organization. So that's a big part of what all companies are now wrestling with. So much that we can learn from that. But I think just the basic understanding of what the military teaches people, right? The teammanship, right? It's all about the team. It's not about I, right? Those concepts are embedded in you in the military. The servant leadership aspects, the discipline aspects that people in the military have to go through. Again, all those are so relevant to the private sector. So I think companies that aren't taking advantage of it are missing a huge opportunity, as there is so much opportunity there. So I think there's so many of them are so obvious. And then we talked about the things that we can do to embrace that, and how do we attract the right folks to join the military, or from the military to come to organization, are big benefits to us.
Yeah, I think all those things, Ken, those are all the benefits. I think to your point around how do you support, sometimes it can feel daunting to an organization that doesn't have, say, a connection to the Thayer Group or others. And the good news is there are lots of organizations out there that can help bridge that gap. I mentioned an organization, Breakline, which I work with. Vets in Tech is a phenomenal network, for example. So it's 50,000 veterans and their spouses networked across 60 chapters in 20 cities. And it's all about helping veterans speak the language, get the education, and get access to employment. And so as an employer, all I really need to do is find an organization like that and build that bridge to help translate the skills that I need. Craig Newmark of Craigslist, right, is a big and supporter as well, and on that board with me at Vets in Tech. And he's really focused on cyber and upcoming upskilling transitioning veterans for cyber, and he's donated a lot of his personal wealth to that effort. So there's these great connections you can go find in organizations out there, many of which are oriented exactly to what your company's trying to do. Now then, to Linda's point, once it's there, you want to have an affiliation or a resource group to support them while they're there. But I think our first step is making sure we build that bridge to those transitioning veterans looking for employment. And if we do that, right, everything else is much easier to follow.
Yeah, and here's a really easy thing that folks can think about as your folks are out recruiting for a position. One, make sure that you have recruiters that understand how to read the resumes of our veterans. And if they don't know, there are organizations that can really help, like Hire Heroes, and even Easter Seals has a veteran support network in which they support hiring. And so when you just think about that aspect of it, that aspect of making sure that you understand how to take and translate that resume if it doesn't have all the things that you may typically be looking at, and then translating that into those business skills. The other piece is when you're posting and you're posting openings, if you're using a recruiting system that you have, whether it's an electronic system, look at those recruiting boards. There are tons of recruiting boards. I say tons, but there's quite a few out there that are focused specifically on veterans. Make sure you check that box so that you're not just getting them in like, Indeed and some of the other ones. You're going to go right to the veteran recruiting networks. I mean, those are great places to just kind of start if you want to bring more veterans in. And then if you really want to up your game, just like you would do with any other diversity category, set goals and targets for your organization. Because, having a more diverse organization is only going to double and triple your bottom line.
Yeah.
And that's a resume. Thank you. Actually, General Singh, that answered one of the questions we had gotten, which is, what resources would you recommend to an organization looking to start a formal program in veterans hiring and diversity? So now that really gets right to it, too. We actually, just along these lines as well, and Ken, you had mentioned with servant leadership as well, or with this in mind. Actually, I'll tweak it a little. Resources for veterans looking to make the transition and how to make their credentials and resumes more translatable. Those same organizations to help bridge that gap or meet in the middle, if you will?
Linda, so again,
Hire Heroes. So they're one that I've specifically looked at their resumes, and I love the resume format. I mean, so you want to, if you are a veteran and you really want to get some help with your resume, that is one organization. Some of the other ones that I mentioned, which is the Veteran Support Network at Easter Seals, all of those organizations will help you recraft your resume. And then even your transition services that's provided when you leave the military, there's a lot of support that you get with the transition services. I would actually take the resume that you get from the transition services and go out and look at one of these other organizations. I have to put in just another plug for like the Institute for Veterans and Military Families that not only helps you to translate your resume into something that's more meaningful for private industry, but also looking at whether or not you want to start small businesses. If you look at the number of small businesses out there that's started by veterans, it's an overwhelming number. And so there's so many things as a veteran that you can do when you start your second and your third career.
Yeah, I think that echo, so first as a veteran, go find those organizations, go engage, right? Whether it's Hire Heroes, Vets in Tech, Breakline, and get that support. And then to Linda's other point, make sure as the company, you connect with them. Because they're, most of them are nonprofits or they're supported by your donations or your engagement. And so you want to do that, and you want to train your recruiters to be able to be that final aspect of that bridge. And, there's also training your hiring managers, right? There's this also aspect of getting to that next level of the interview. It's a challenging thing, right? For a soldier, an airman, or a sailor who's never, done an interview for a job before. So you want to make sure you also equip your team members to build that bridge in that aspect of it. And then, you do this right, and it becomes a very, very, self-serving, a positive cycle, a very positive cycle. And self-reinforcing was what I was looking for. And that's really a powerful thing, too, to watch it happen.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Ken, any thoughts along those lines?
I mean, I think, if I was looking at, if I was in the military looking to make a transition, what I'd be looking at is companies that, have an affinity towards this, that have these affinity groups, these support groups that are geared towards that. And I would focus on those companies because, that's going to be an easier way in.
Yeah.
And there's so many companies like that. So it's obviously with, all the search engines out there, it's very, very easy to find those companies that have the affinity towards that. And those are the companies I would start to target and go after, because you can have far greater success there.
Yeah, Ken, that's right. And the Military Times actually publishes every year, the Military Times publishes the top employers to work for, the top employers for veterans. And so to make it even easier, if they just go out to Military Times and keep up, each year they publish a new list of employers and they have a rating system for them. And so, it goes across a wide spectrum. And so that's a great place for them to start looking at in terms of, when they start looking at prospect employers.
Right. Great point. And General Singh, you also brought a great point up too in terms of entrepreneurship or veterpreneurs. We see a lot of them at NASDAQ, and one other thing to add to that is we're seeing more groups that are specifically allocating investments to that out there. And then to end on one other point is I bring this up in our own employer, a great support group and a great affinity group. And just a reminder that we veterans don't self-promote always, it's team. So any thoughts to the transitioning veterans there and support about how to reconcile team first with a little bit of sales? And also, Dan, I can start with you, or Dan and Ken, you've done a little bit of sales out there and you've got a little bit of military background.
Your first point's really valid. And again, there's a lot of development organizations. Vets in Tech is great. As I mentioned, the 3 E's, and the third E of that stool is entrepreneurship. So it's giving veterans this, the tools and the skills to think, hey, I do want to go start my own business. And how do I do that? And how do I build that in a kit? So I also believe it's really important for veterans not to think the only move is to go join an organization. You can also get skilled up and go use your unique expertise. And as Linda said, there's lots of us out here that want to work with you. So if you're a transitioning veteran, that's key. But yeah, there's absolutely this focus on, I'm not, networking above my pay grade, in the military was frowned upon. Here, that networking is valuable and it helps advance your career. So giving team members that skill set around networking, what that means is powerful, because in the end, you're just gaining information. You're not, we use lots of different adjectives to describe it or verbs to describe it, but in the end, you're increasing, your book of knowledge, and that's what this is about. And so telling those who are not advertising and not self-promoting, that's not the reason to network above your pay grade. The reason to network above your pay grade is to get insights, to get information, and then to expand your knowledge. And so if you help them get to that aspect of it, a lot of that transition is made easier for them.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because I was actually looking at this panel, and I want to make sure that people understand, why this is so important. I mean, if you listen to our backgrounds, we have an E4, we have a major, we have a captain and a major general, and let me tell you, the major, the captain, and the E4 are sitting in C-suite level positions. And when I say C-suite, that means they're sitting at those executive level positions. And you may not, if you're not paralleling that, I guess the point that I want to make here is that, your most valuable player could be an E1. But you don't know that most valuable player is an E1 in the military, the lowest level in the military, until you get to know the skills and the background that they bring, which is more than what you see sometimes in the rank structure itself. I mean, when I think of the Maryland Guard and some of the individuals that I got a chance to sit down and talk to, I had E1s and E4s that had PhDs, for God's sakes, and they were doing things out in the private sector that you wouldn't think about. And so, my hat's off to the folks here on the panel, because you've taken what has been, a great leadership ability that was given to you by the military, and you've just expounded on that. And that's what I think is so amazing about this panel. And what excites me is I'm looking at, CEOs and, leaders of organizations, and Rob, with everything that I've, kind of done with you. So I want people to really take, something from this panel and really see it for what it is.
Yeah, really good point.
Thank you. With that, and we've actually got some questions that came in too. One that I really liked is obvious the proliferation of support groups out there. Is some consolidation called for, do you think? So let's General Singh, I'll start with you. We wrap it up here.
I think somebody else was going to start. I think Kim was going to start.
So look, having started two of them myself, I think the best thing we have is innovation. So it absolutely can be confusing and overwhelming. But what I love is whether it's IVMF or Vets in Tech or even the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans Association, each of them has found the thing that they're specifically good at. So it does take some effort. But we live in a consumer society where I take the effort to understand the products. So I much rather support a bit of a proliferation, because I think it says a lot, than a consolidation where innovation is hampered. So I'm all for as many organizations as want to figure out how to lean in. Sometimes they consolidate, and that's good, just like we see in the corporate and professional world. But I also really value all the innovation we see out there in different groups. It is overwhelming at times, but I think it's also still navigable, and there's lots of ways to get there.
Yeah, and I would say, there was a project that, we tried to go down the path of not necessarily consolidating, but trying to put all the information into one place. And, it ended up not being able to work as effectively as it could have. And what I would say is that, and that's because the need for support is so great just across the world and the U.S. and world, that you need multiple points of entry, because people are going to come in at different places. They're going to access at different places. And so I would say that it is a little bit overwhelming, but if you were to go out and just do a Google search, there will be tons of organizations that will come up. I think the key thing is finding something that speaks to you, finding something that may, solve that need that you have right now, and realize that could change over time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think that we're going to have to leave it there. We can certainly continue, or could continue, but General Singh and Ken and Dan, thank you so much for being on this panel, and especially for your service and your continued service and leadership. The topic as well, and just look forward to continuing the conversation as well. Again, really do appreciate it too. And now for the group out there, can't thank you enough again for joining us for this panel as well. And now we have a treat. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Seary, who's known as the history guy at West Point, is going to give us a quick video history lesson about Veterans Day.
Hello, I'm Dave Seary, the history guy, and today I'd like to talk with you about Veterans Day. Veterans Day is one of two holidays recognizing service and sacrifice in the armed forces of the United States. The other is Memorial Day, initially called Decoration Day, which is observed on the last Monday in May. Memorial Day originally honored Union Civil War dead by placing flowers or flags on their graves. While Memorial Day honors and remembers those who died during wartime, Veterans Day honors all those who served. Veterans Day is celebrated on November 11th and was first called Armistice Day, recognizing the armistice that marked the end of hostilities during the First World War. The World War I ceasefire went into effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. Armistice Day as a holiday was initially celebrated on November 11th, 1919, on the one-year anniversary of the end of World War I, and was marked by an address by President Wilson to the country. In 1926, Congress adopted a resolution requesting that President Coolidge issue an annual proclamation. In 1938, Congress made Armistice Day a federal holiday. In 1945, following the end of the Second World War, Raymond Weeks, a World War II veteran, proposed changing the holiday to honor all veterans, and in 1947, Weeks led the first National Veterans Day celebration. In 1954, Congress officially changed the name from Armistice Day to Veterans Day. But wait, there's more. Bright red poppies are often associated with Veterans Day. Traditionally, that flower had been associated with sleep, peace, and death. But during World War I, the poppy took on additional significance, blooming abundantly in the war-torn earth of France and Belgium, and inspiring Canadian Army surgeon John McCrae to write the deeply moving poem, In Flanders Field. Since that time, poppies have symbolized Veterans Day in America and Remembrance Day in other countries. Here at West Point, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and volunteers regularly place flags on the graves in the West Point Cemetery in observance of Veterans Day and Memorial Day. Thank you, and have a wonderful Veterans Day.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. This will conclude our session, and now we're going to be heading to the next session, which is diversity from the military to the boardroom. So you can access the session by clicking on the tile on your console that just notes that next session. And if you've pre-registered, you'll simply have to click on the already registered at the top of the page to enter. And we hope you enjoy the remainder of the event. Thank you again, and happy Veterans Day.